UFC Mexico City just wrapped up. We did end up having a fight canceled. We had a lot of finishes. Card was absolutely amazing. Let's get into the full card recap. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get it underway. Before we get into the recap, I do want to highlight Joe Pyfer versus Kelvin Gastelum was canceled due to Joe Pyfer coming down with a sickness. He did make weight. Both fighters made weight, but I will pull up his statement. Just want to say my heart is broken. I couldn't fight today. I got super sick, yada, yada, yada. Hopefully the fight, ends up getting rescheduled, but this was, sad to see an hour before the event. He actually, did a interview, shortly before they decided to cancel the fight, saying that this was the healthiest he's ever been. And, he was so ready to go, but ended up getting the fight canceled due to an illness. Hopefully Joe Pyfer, gets it back together and we get to see him soon. But starting off the card, we had Markel Medeiros taking on Austin Hubbard. Fight went exactly how I thought it would. Very competitive 3-round decision for Markel Medeiros. First round, Medeiros started off with some nice stance switches. He had some really good leg kicks. It was clear that he had, the advantage as far as hand speed. He landed a lot more shots. Late takedown attempt from Austin Hubbard, but, Medeiros ended up defending it very well. Second round came out. Hubbard made the adjustments, realized that he needed to, pressure wrestle very early, secures the takedown. He had back control for, about 4 minutes of the round, threatened to choke, ended up having the body triangle locked in the entire time. He was on Medeiros' back for majority of the time. Being locked in a body triangle, that it will zap both of their energy. Hubbard trying to, remain on his back and also sucking the wind out of Medeiros. That was pretty taxing on both of them. Round 3 came, they both came out. Hubbard, stays on the pressure, secured another takedown as Medeiros, instead of defending the takedown, he ends up shooting for a guillotine. In those situations, you always have to defend the takedown, never go for the submission because you'll end up on your back. And that's exactly what happened. Hubbard secures him, threatens an arm triangle. He ends up getting reversed with about 2 minutes left. They got back to their feet. Medeiros ends up cutting him with a pretty good elbow that he landed after he, reversed position. Hubbard failed a takedown attempt at the end of the round, ended up on his back, and Medeiros landed a few shots to end the round. Markel Medeiros ended up winning, a 29-28 decision, just like I thought. It was a pretty good, scrappy veteran lesson for him, and Austin Hubbard walks away as the loser. He did put up, a valiant effort, but Markel Medeiros comes away with the win. We'll see what they give him next. His striking did look pretty good in this fight. I think if you give him another fighter around the style of Austin Hubbard, it will present a little bit more trouble. Someone who can string together, the striking a little bit better. But Markel Medeiros handled it just as I thought he would. Moving on to the featherweights, we had Jamal Emmers taking on Gabriel Miranda. Fight starts. Miranda secures a takedown early on the pressure. Threatens an inverted head and arm triangle, has Jamal Emmers locked in it for about 90 seconds. They both get back to their feet. Emmers gets to work with the striking, big right hands, drops Miranda twice. Like I stated in the breakdown, Jamal Emmers, he's very loose with his striking, but if he connects, he's definitely going to hurt you. So he ends up dropping him twice in the very first round. Big elbow in the clinch, wobbles Miranda. After Emmers drops him again, he lets him back up. He was not trying to engage in any type of jiu-jitsu competition with Gabriel Miranda, as he shouldn't. He almost finished the fight in the first, 90 seconds. He finally calms his nerves. He took a deep breath, lands a beautiful knee to the body and a right hand across Miranda's chin, and he was asleep. Picture perfect call on this one. Jamal Emmers gets the first round finish, and just as I expected, he was going to knock him out if he connected with one of those looping right hands, and he did after about 4 minutes in the first round. Running up, we got Rafa Garcia taking on Vince Pichel. It was a scrappy fight. Thought Rafa would look a little better than what he did, but we'll get into the breakdown. Round one, Rafa was very heavy on the MMA boxing, out the orthodox stance. Had some really good body work. Heavy on the feints. Had Vince biting on the feints a lot. Vince landed a few counters. As Rafa was entering the pocket, I think Vince started to find his range and his timing. Middle of the round was pretty stagnant, and then towards the end of the round, Rafa ends up landing a late takedown. Round two comes out. Vince is more comfortable trading shots. He's getting his jab going. Then there's a eye poke that stops the momentum of the fight for about 45 seconds. They get back to work. Pichel is very heavy with his, Pichel is going to work with his lead hand. The jab is working. The cross is working. Cracking leg kicks. Rafa's, it was looking like Rafa was stuck in mud. Pichel definitely upped his striking output in the second round. Hurt Rafa with teeps to the body. It looked like, he was getting gassed in the second round. So I definitely gave Vince Pichel the second round. Round three, Rafa answers the call at heavy pressure, beginning of the round. Vince begins to, respond well and takes the momentum back. Teep to the body was hurting Rafa again. Definitely looked like he was winded, like I was saying in the second round. The leg kicks were working for Rafa. And then Vince begins to fade. His coach was telling him in the corner, wake his feet up, because he was definitely standing right in front of Rafa Garcia, getting teed off on. Rafa ends up landing a takedown with about 40 seconds left. He slammed him down, did a little bit of work, and sealed that third round for him. The way I scored it was 29-28 Rafa Garcia, but he had 30-27 on two cards, which I completely disagree. Vince Pichel definitely won the second round, clearly. Had Rafa Garcia not hurt, but definitely, winded, and was the more active fighter in the second round. I don't know who gave out those 30-27s, but they definitely need to be investigated, because that was clearly 29-28 Rafa Garcia. But Rafa Garcia walks away with the victory. Running up, we got Lupita Godinez taking on Julia Palastri. This was a really fun fight. Round one, they came out swinging. Palastri attempts an axe kick, and Lupi catches the kick and power bombs her right on her back. She rallies some control time. She looks to, almost have a crucifix position locked up, and she ends up transitioning to half guard. Laura Sanko was actually saying that, for women in jiu-jitsu, they have a much stronger lower half, so women are able to, kind of, flip their bodies out of that position a little better than men are. So I guess that's why Lupi didn't put her in a crucifix position, but she had it there. Definitely could have, did some big damage. Probably ended the fight if she was able to secure it. But as she was controlling Julia was landing some pretty good elbows from the bottom. It was just, a controlling, grappling round for Lupita Godinez in the first. Round two, Lupi lands, two takedowns back to back to start the round. Julia is cutting her with elbows from the bottom again. Julia, she definitely lacked takedown defense, but she's pretty good defensively off of her back, if that makes sense. Definitely needs to work on the takedown defense, the wrestling defense. But as far as jiu-jitsu or striking off of her back or jiu-jitsu off of her back, she was definitely, in the game and well aware of everything that was going on. But second round, she was just getting completely controlled. She landed a few shots off of her back, but again, that's not enough to win a round or anything unless you're doing big damage. Then we get to round three, and the Psycho, you see her, her nickname definitely awakened. Julia Palastri was walking forward with her hands down, big shot after big shot, walking through anything Lupi was throwing. She was she was countering a lot of Lupi's, hooks and overhands. Lupi looked, very loopy, so to say. She said in her corner after the second round that she had to poop, and it looked like that's exactly what was going on. She was definitely stuck, getting cracked. It was a hell of a round from Julia Palastri in that third round. Definitely, if she would have put, a little bit more pressure on, it looked like Lupi was on her way out, but she ended up surviving to the bell. gritty fight. Lupi definitely edged it out. I expected a little bit more, takedown defense from Julia Pilastri, but that's ultimately what lost her the fight. If she was able to defend those takedowns, I think she would have had a lot more success on the feet. But Lupi Godinez walks away as the victor, 29-28. And yeah, I'm not upset with the pick of Julia Pilastri. She just needs to work on the takedown defense. But pretty good and entertaining fight for a fight to go decision. Moving up in the featherweight division, we had the lock of the week: Maquizio Costa taking on C-Rod Christian Rodriguez. Round one, it was just a heavy clinch work from Christian Rodriguez. He had Maquizio up against the fence. He attempted 4 takedowns, didn't land any. They were honestly just trading control time on the fence for about 4 minutes. Costa was landing some strikes in the clinch. C-Rod he was shooting for takedown. He had Maquizio in an anaconda he had C-Rod ended up shooting for a takedown, and he had Maquizio in an anaconda choke, but Melky ended up reversing and landed some elbows from the top to end the round. Second round, they exchanged a few strikes before C-Rod ended up crashing to the clinch again, puts him up against the cage. Maquizio Costa had a hard time defending, the foot sweeps. He got taken down, or at least put on his back from the foot sweeps alone. Never, a solid takedown attempt. It was just the foot sweeps. DC was also mentioning on the commentary that he definitely needs to work on that, and it was a little scary, being that I bet on him as the lock of the week. When we got to the decision, I thought that would weigh a little bit more, but Maquizio was able to, not stay under Christian Rodriguez for a lot of those takedown attempts or foot sweeps. They're in the clinch again, and Maquizio lands a pretty big elbow, split C-Rod's eye open. Big knee to the head. It hurts C-Rod. It has him wobbled. He's on his back. Maquizio's trying to finish the fight. Ends up jumping a ghillie towards the end of the round, but C-Rod ends up escaping, and he survives. Almost locked up the submission, which I also played, but C-Rod, he's tough. He's a tough customer, and he ended up escaping it. Third round, both of these gentlemen were more willing to engage on the feet. Good elbows from both of them. The momentum was swinging both ways. But again, Christian Rodriguez with the foot sweeps, landed some big knees in the clinch, and it was honestly just a Christian Rodriguez round. Maquizio Costa ended up winning, unanimous decision, 29-28. Christian Rodriguez is pretty tough to finish. Like I mentioned in the breakdown, his lack of a submission threat on the ground definitely bit him in the ass. Striking could use some improvement as well. He has the he had the reach advantage in his fight, but he never established a jab or any strikes to, put Maquizio Costa at bay. So that definitely, worked against him in this fight. But prediction came through: Maquizio Costa to win, and thank you for cashing. Next up in the middleweight division, we had the debuting Ateba, the silent assassin Gautier, taking on Jose Medina. Jesus Christ. That's all I can say. God damn, Jesus Christ. Ateba Gautier is nasty. I expected him to get the knockout, but this was just above, my imagination. I thought Jose Medina would be able to, survive a little longer than what he did, but Ateba is nasty, bro. His striking is very clean. He's very composed. He's very patient. He was rocking Medina with some big shots. Medina was egging him on, and Ateba puts him up against the cage, throws a combination to the body. Jose jumps off the cage, and he ends up eating a knee right to the face. I think Ateba Gautier has a lot of potential. He's training over in Manchester. Well, it's not listed here, but he's training with Lerone Murphy, actually, and Frank Mir, as his grappling coach. So I think he has a lot of potential. He's still raw, but his striking looked amazing. He reminded me a lot of not early Francis Ngannou, but Francis Ngannou when he fought Stipe Miocic the second time, when he was very patient, found his shots, and ended up finishing the job just like Ateba did. If Ateba, continues to work on his takedown defense, I think I have the perfect fight for him. And I think Ateba should line it up with Cody Brundage. I think that's a good fight to do next. This guy has a lot of potential. And come out there and knock him out or even submit him, but it will be a good test to see, where he is working with Frank Mir and Lerone Murphy. So I hope they line that up for him next. Definitely impressed with the finish from this guy, and I'll be looking forward to seeing what he's got coming down the pipeline. Next up to the main card opener, guys. If you haven't already, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We had Kevin Borjas taking on Lazy Boy Ronaldo Rodriguez. Kevin Borjas looked absolutely amazing. Came out, sat Lazy Boy down with a straight right hand twice. And Lazy Boy, he just flipped off of his back, got right back up, took a knee to the face, was just getting absolutely beaten and battered for the entire first round. I'm not sure, how he was able to take those shots. Maybe it's because he missed weight, but, they looked exactly like the fight against Odie Osborne. He got cracked. The only difference is Lazy Boy was unable to get a hand of Kevin Borjas. Borjas, he put on a striking masterclass, honestly. He was able to defend any takedown attempt that, Lazy Boy tried. Second round came out, he dropped him again. Borjas was looking like a slick counter striker the entire fight. The straight right was landing at ease. Lazy Boy putting pressure on, but he was not mixing any strikes, just walking forward. And when you're doing that, you're not going to be able to get a guy down with a takedown attempt because you're not throwing anything else at them. It's just a telegraph takedown attempt. You're not going to be able to get anybody down with that. He definitely, dropped 2 rounds, did no damage. He had, a couple leg kicks, but that's not going to win you a round at all. So he was down 2-0 after the second round. Third round, Borjas was just sticking and moving. He knew he was up. He knew he won the fight already. Absolute counterfest from Kevin Borjas. He looked, top 10 potential. He's always, I knew he was a really good striker, but this performance definitely, took his game up a notch. And man, way to do it to, the hometown hero in Mexico. I don't know how it was 29-28. I think, we need to investigate those judges as well. Definitely 30-27. And I have a pretty good matchup for Kevin Borjas next, too. You could do either Felipe Dos Santos, or we could do a guy that's also on his card, but we'll get there later. But shout out to Kevin Borjas for, the very impressive win. Up next, we had David Martinez taking on Simon Oliveira. Just like I predicted. You could see David Martinez definitely had, the UFC debut jitters. He was very antsy, very, jittery. He was throwing everything with the intentions to take Simon Oliveira's head off. He ended up finding the shot after, he didn't really relax, but the opportunity presented itself and Simon threw a jab. David pulled it, threw a straight right hand, knee up the middle. Simon Oliveira was on his way down to the mat, ground and pound, TKO. Oliveira was stiff, bouncing his head off the mat, and it was an absolutely amazing debut for David Martinez. Got the round 1 finish just as I predicted, and this guy is going to be impressive at 135. He looked a little undersized in there, honestly. They have him 5'7" here, but it looked like he was 5'5", and Simon Oliveira was 5'7". He did look a little short, but his striking is definitely something to be, talked about, as it was when I did the breakdown and how it's been presented to us by the UFC. This guy is a very good striker. His background, and I'm really interested to see what they match him up with next. Up next, we have Mr. Chiwiwis, Raul Rosas Jr. taking on Vince Morales. Just as I predicted, a very uneventful 3-round decision. Well, it wasn't uneventful, but Raul Rosas just doesn't present a danger factor other than, grappling control. He might throw a submission in there, but other than that, his striking looked a little better. Vince ended up defending the first takedown, and they ended up getting secured for a majority of the round. Rosas had to control and top pressure. In the end of the round, Vince defends, the hooks nicely and reverses the position. He attempted a Peruvian necktie, but short time. So Raul Roses ended up taking the first round. Second round, Raul secures another takedown rally, some more control time. Yeah, I think if he invested in some ground and pound, he'd be a lot more dangerous of a fighter, especially, working his way up towards the rankings. I think that's something that he's definitely going to need to incorporate into his game. So maybe if, send him 2, 3 years Dagestan and forget, he'll be able, to make some ripples up at top 15 in bantamweight division. But round three, Roses ends up getting another takedown. Vince actually locked up a Peruvian necktie and then transitioned to an anaconda choke. And Raul Roses was looking like he was in some trouble. His face was completely red. He was locked in there for at least probably like a minute. Raul ended up escaping, survived, but he locked it up again with about 20 seconds to go. And Raul just couldn't do anything but sit there up until the bell rang. Um, yeah, he's sticking his neck out there against a guy who's pretty dangerous on the mat as well. As you climb up the rankings, that's going to happen. And if you don't invest in something to deter guys away from trying to submit you, you're going to get submitted. So Raul Rosas, winner by unanimous decision. If he invests in some ground and pound and focus on the striking a little bit more, he'll be a lot more dangerous and he'll be ready for the rankings, a lot faster. Send him to Dagestan. Next up in the featured bout, we had Edgar Chairez taking on CJ Vergara. Edgar Chairez' first round finish, it was an absolute ass whooping. Cracked CJ Vergara, right hook, dropped him, and then he ended up cinching, the rear naked choke. It was a perfect call. I think CJ Vergara is on his way out of the UFC. Very emotional, post fight interview from Edgar Chairez. He said that I believe it's his grandfather sold his truck last year so he could get a surgery, and now his grandfather or his father is up in heaven looking down at him. He was very emotional. Very good win for Edgar Chairez. I'm very impressed with what Edgar Chairez did. I expected him to do this, but I think he has a very bright future in the UFC. I think if you want to give him another fun fight, you give him Kevin Boras. That's the fight I was talking about earlier. Edgar Chairez looked absolutely amazing. And in the co-main event of the evening, we had Manuel El Loco Torres taking on Drew Dober. Round one, Manuel Torres straight right hand cracks Drew Dober. Drew Dober is hanging on to Manuel's ankle for dear life. Manuel's smashing his face in. Drew Dober went out. He's kissing his own glove. The ref would not stop the fight. Jesus, man. It looked a lot like the Jalen Turner versus Bobby Green finish. You got to stop the fight a little sooner. Drew Dober, man, that was tough to watch. But I told you guys, Manuel Torres was the guy. He was going to get it done, and he did. Not even 2 minutes into the very first round. Man, I really like Manuel Torres, man. He looked pretty good defensively, too. Didn't, take anything from Drew Dober that had him hurt. Definitely kept, the defense high, the high guard up. Very impressive finish from him. I think I got two good fights for him. We could give him either Benoit Saint Denis or we could give him Fares Ziam. I think Fares Ziam matchup would be pretty good because he's a pretty fundamental striker, and Manuel would bring the chaos factor to that fight, whereas you could give him BSD and both of them bring a chaos factor. But very impressive victory from Manuel Torres. Definitely can't wait to see what they give him, and perfect prediction on the knockout. And in the main event of the evening, we had the assassin baby Brandon Moreno taking on Steve Astro Boy Erceg. Moreno walked away with the unanimous decision, but I don't know. I have to watch this fight again. Watching it live, I thought Steve Erceg won more than one round. Thought he won the second round, the third round, and I think the fourth round was very competitive. But 49-46, I'm gonna have to watch it again. I thought Steve Erceg, definitely had a better account of himself than what the judges gave to him. But breaking down the fight, first round, Moreno's boxing looked very crisp. He was testing Steve Erceg's chin very early. Overhand left hand rocked Steve Erceg. Had him running back towards the cage. Erceg returned with some leg kicks, and he began to find his counter towards the end of the round. But it was definitely a Brandon Moreno round. I wouldn't say he dropped him, but he rocked him pretty good. Second round, I felt like Steve Erceg gained the momentum back. He had a lot of good combinations in close. Found the counter to the overhand. The jab was working, and he landed some really good kicks to the body. Felt like that was a very clear Steve Erceg round. 1-1 going into the third. The third round, I felt it was, tit for tat. It looked like Brandon Moreno was reaching a lot, especially with the overhand. Erceg was finding the counters again, tight shots and close. Kind of looked like Moreno was starting to, suck some wind, and Erceg was landing some pretty good knees. So I gave round 3 to Steve Erceg. So I had it 2-1 going into the fourth. Now round 4 starts, and Erceg was sticking and moving, avoiding a lot of Moreno's big shots. In the pocket, trading very well, avoided, he kept his guard up, did not get hit clean with much. Moreno was overswinging a lot, landing on the gloves. Erceg was pretty clean, and I felt like the commentary team was being very biased. They were saying Brandon Moreno was putting on a master class, but if you watch the fight, he was really just slapping Erceg. There's a lot of slapping shots to the glove, slapping shots on the shoulders. He would land, for every shot that hit Erceg's glove, he would hit Erceg maybe once or twice in the exchange. I don't know, man. According to the refs, he was up 3-1, or I don't see that. Fifth round, it was very competitive, but Brandon Moreno ended up securing a takedown. Well, it wasn't really a takedown. Erceg, I believe, he threw a kick, and Moreno ended up on top. It's kind of similar to Erceg versus Pantoja, where he made the mistake and got taken down at the very end of the fight. And similar mistake, similar outcome. Brandon Moreno walks away with the unanimous decision. I don't know. I disagree. I'm definitely gonna have to watch it again tomorrow. I felt like Steve Erceg won round 2, 3, and 4, but I picked Brandon Moreno ultimately, and I walked away a winner as well. Let me know in the comments how you guys scored the fight. I saw a lot of people calling me crazy. I don't know. Maybe I watch fights differently. I didn't see Brandon Moreno landing a lot. Looking at the stats, Steve Erceg actually outlanded him. I don't think they're going to be on tap. Let's go to UFC. I know the stats will be there. If we look at the stats, let's see. Round 1, let's see. Brandon Moreno clear round, even though he was outstruck by Erceg. Definitely knocked Erceg down in this first round. I didn't even give him the knockdown. Look at that. Round 2, Erceg outstruck him. Round 3, Erceg. Round 4, Erceg. Round 5, Moreno, and then you got the takedown. So I don't know. I feel like, the way I scored the fight, I gave Erceg 2, 3, come on, and 4. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not impressed with that win from Brandon Moreno. I didn't think he won the fight at all. So it is what it is. I did pick him to win. He ended up winning. So, I get the W, but I was not impressed with Brandon Moreno's performance. He looked similar. It didn't look like he made any adjustments throughout the fight. It was just throw the overhand right, throw the overhand left. He didn't use any grappling, and I feel like Steve Erceg was a lot cleaner on the feet. So, but we walk away as a winner. If we go through the picks, let's go back to the card. Let's close this up. We had Medeiros over Hubbard, 1-0. We had Emmers over Miranda, 2-0. Had Rafa over Pichel, 3-0. We ended up losing. We had Palastri over Godinez, so 3-1. Had Costa with the lock of the week, 4-1. Had Gautier, 5-1. Had we lost with this one with Lazy Boy, so 5-2. Had David Martinez 6-2, Raul 7-2, Edgar 8-2, Manuel 9-2, and Moreno 10-2 on the day. Excellent day for picks for me. The only two that came through were Lazy Boy getting absolutely demolished, and Julia almost finishing the fight. So I'm not really upset with that loss. Now let's roll over to Makai's Money Making Plays, where I had 3 plays for you guys, 2 parlays and a straight. Edgar Shirez inside the distance, David Martinez by knockout, and Manuel Torres money line. If you played that, I played that again, got better odds. If you played that, you came up big. I also had Melquizio Costa by submission and Ateba by knockout. Very close for the submission to come through. Unfortunately, it didn't, but that would have been a pretty good, parlay to hit. Ateba got the knockout, so we live and we learn with that one. And then we had the lock of the week, Melquizio Costa, come through. I'm just showing you guys that, I pay what I play, So if you tailed the bets this week, you came out green with me. Very good day, very good card, very exciting card. We had a few guys get performance of the night. We had Ateba Gautier get performance, Edgar Shirez, David Martinez, and Manuel Torres. Rightfully so. All 4 of those guys finished their fights in emphatic fashions. Very, very great UFC fight night card. Looking back at the London card, this is how you do a fight night. This was an amazing card. If I had to score the card, I would give it a 9 out of 10, honestly. We had a few decisions, but even the decisions were very competitive, very entertaining. Especially the Lazy Boy Borjas. That was, unexpected. And then the Palastri fight was really good. The Lupi Godinez versus Julia Palastri fight was very entertaining. And Medeiros and Hubbard was, back and forth, very entertaining fight. The Rafa Garcia fight was okay, but it was a really good card. Really excited with how the night went. Only stain of it, honestly, was the Raul Rosas did not do, to get the crowd behind them, really. But other than that, it was a great night of fights. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will be working on UFC Fight Night, Josh Emmett versus Lerone Murphy next. Getting, my predictions out for that one Monday night. Thank you guys for tuning into the channel. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends. And I'll see you guys on the next one.